What is crackalating, everybody? Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by Number Fire. That is right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and NumberFire.com, as we are getting you set for the WGC-Mexico Championship at the Club de Chapultepec for this weekend from a DFS perspective. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for NumberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for NumberFire. Brandon, PGA DFS, no-cut event this weekend. I am ecstatic about that. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Always love a good no-cut event for DFS purposes because you always feel like you're still in it somehow, even if you're not. Even if all you guys are 50th or worse, you're like, well, you never know. You never know. But when you miss the cut, you can't really contend. So we get that this week, and pretty excited about that.
The other reason I'm excited is because for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see this right now. Brandon and I are wearing the exact same sweater, and it's a FanDuel hoodie.
It's a hoodie. It's a hoodie.
Okay, whatever.
Not a sweater.
I never know the difference between sweaters and sweatshirts. It's very confusing. But
it's not that confusing.
It is very confusing. Very confusing. Brandon tried to take the sweater off once he saw we were wearing the same thing. I threatened to quit. For some reason, that was effective. I feel like talking about a blessing. But he put the hoodie back on. So this is why you watch the YouTube streams of the podcast. We do this for PGA at 10 a.m. every Tuesday. XFL 1 is live every Thursday at 10 a.m. If not for that, you would never know the fashion choices that Brandon and I are making. And today, I feel like we're making a statement by wearing the exact same thing.
Yes, and that statement is that Jim was going to quit the podcast if I did not put
No, not the podcast.
hoodie.
I was going to quit my job. I was going to quit altogether, everything.
So if I take it off now,
I don't care. It's fine.
All right. Well, I thought maybe I just wanted to see what you would do. If you were going to quit if I didn't wear it and I took it off now, I wanted to.
No, I wanted the world to see that we are the same fashionably. Because I get roasted on Twitter all the time for wearing jeans because I work from home. If they see that we're wearing the same thing, it means we're the same person. Meaning every time I get roasted, you are tangentially getting roasted. And that makes me feel better about myself and brings joy to my life. I want you to get just skewered for stuff that is not your fault.
You could not pay me to wear jeans in my own home.
Are you wearing jeans right now?
No.
I am. I'm actually not even wearing house jeans. I am wearing going out jeans because I had to do laundry yesterday.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, we're a little bunched up. It's not the most comfortable.
How many pairs of jeans do you have?
Enough.
Is it more than 8?
No. I think I have 6 pairs of jeans. 2 of which are only for staying in the house. Maybe 3. I don't know. It depends on how you classify one pair. There are some fringe ones. These are definitely going out jeans. The problem is they're kind of short. So my ankles are kind of showing. It's a little chilly, but these are the sacrifices you must make in order to dress good, feel good.
Yeah, feel good is not something that I feel like happens when I'm wearing jeans. So I just wear like joggers and like basketball shorts, and it works for me.
Just know that you are forever tied to me fashionably now. So you're welcome. You're welcome, Brandon, and you're welcome, world. As mentioned, we are streaming this live on YouTube, so you can always see our interesting fashion choices. You just go to the FanDuel YouTube feed right when we go live at 10 a.m. every Tuesday and Thursday. We also have this on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Busy week there once again because we have PGA, NASCAR podcast coming up for Las Vegas at some point this week, depending on when they post contests. Also have XFL podcast coming up on Thursday, and then after the NBA All-Star break, the Daily ISO with Tom Vecchio will be back as well. So make sure you are subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get that right as it is posted. Let's dive on in now to the WGC-Mexico. Again, it is at the Club de Chapultepec. It is 7,345 yards and a par 71. There is no cut. There are roughly 70 golfers in the field. And Brandon, they have been here a couple of times now. This is the 4th time the WGC-Mexico has been held at this course. What can we learn from looking back at past events here at the Club de Chapultepec?
Yeah, you can throw the yardage right out basically because the main defense here, the main obstacle to overcome for these golfers is just wild elevation changes. It's pretty much unlike anything else on the PGA Tour. Uh, rotation list. We have 3 years of data, like you said, but a few things stand out. One is ball striking matters, but also so does everything. It's a tough all-around test of golf, and with this difficult field, it's a WGC event, so we get some of the world's best. You're going to need to be able to convert in pretty much every situation. So again, we're dealing with like the best of the best for the most part at this WGC event. So actually, all 4 strokes gained stats are on my list. Now, I'm not just looking at strokes gained tee to green. I'm looking at strokes gained approach and weighting it most of all of the 4 strokes gained stats. So strokes gained approach is my number 1 key stat, followed by strokes gained off the tee. Strokes gained around the green gets some weight, but less than off the tee. Strokes gained putting, whether you have POA splits or not, putting is going to be a test here. And then if you don't really track strokes gained data, the number 1 stat I would look for is greens and regulation, because that guys who were picking up greens and regulation entering the WGC tended to do better than a lot of golfers who frankly didn't.
Yeah. The putting note, I think, is important here because of what you mentioned about like overall play being important, because like I love our heat check staples, the guys we talk about a lot here on the podcast, guys like Jason Kokrak, Corey Connors, Scotty Scheffler. But the big difference between them and like the top of the leaderboard is going to be ability to convert with the short game. Like there aren't any holes in Dustin Johnson's game. There aren't any holes in Rory McIlroy's game. That's a big difference maker. So at events like this, I am going to factor in putting. I'm still going to recommend guys who are bad putters because I think that sometimes the salaries are enough to compensate for that. But it's something that I feel like I do need to weigh in just because of those factors.
Yeah, and short game's not just putting, it's around the green play, and it's a pretty common archetype for guys to be really good off the tee and with their approach play, but struggle both around the green and putting. Some guys are good around the green, struggle putting, also good ball strikers like Byung-Hun An, for example, but it's pretty common for golfers to be able to lose strokes or both around the green and putting. So Jim already alluded to it. We will be recommending some of those golfers, but you want to kind of keep those options to a minimum this year or for this week.
Yeah. You mentioned the around the green play too. And my process is to look at where golfers who did well at this event ranked for the full season on the PGA Tour. And going back to last year, the median ranking for strokes gained around the green for top 15 finishers was 29th. The median ranking for approach was 26th. The median ranking for scrambling was 60th. Median ranking for putting was 46th. So those are all really low numbers.
Yeah.
But the overall point is that around the green play really did pop. And this is not a process that leads to around the green play popping a lot. So to me, it's very noteworthy when it does. Distance also is very important. But I think that's also kind of like because of the quality of the field, and the best players tend to be guys who are super long. Ian Poulter was tied for 3rd last year. He's not very long. Kieran Alfred Barnrat is also in there, and he's not super long. But for the most part, the guys who did do well had some juice off the tee. So I will have distance in there. I know you mentioned the elevation changes, but overall, I do want to factor in distance. So we're pretty much on the same page here, and I think that emphasizing the importance of short game is critical here. Now, Brandon, because this is a no-cut event, we want to change things up here and look at what last year's optimal lineup looked like, because we can learn a lot from that. Mostly, I would say, from a roster construction perspective. We can also learn something, though, from ownership numbers, how popular guys were, if you want to pivot away from the chalk and stuff like that. What was last year's optimal, and what can it tell us for the WGC Mexico?
Yeah, so last year's optimal was Dustin Johnson, who was 11,900, and Rory McIlroy, who was 11,600, as well as kind of a little bit of balance below that, but someone below 8,000 as well. But we have Sergio Garcia at 10,000, Tyrrell Hatton 9,200, Keegan Bradley at 8,900, and Eos Loughton at 7,800. So That lineup spent 59,400. The year before it maxed out at 60,000. But no golfer in that 2 years ago was below 8,600, and then there were four golfers from 8,600 to 9,600. Two studs per optimal in these 2 years. So basically, think of it as kind of get your two studs, and then you just because it's a no cut event, you don't want to punt completely. Obviously, the one of the big issues with optimal lineups in golf is that golfers who are priced at the minimum salary can hit their high end of variance, and obviously they're good plays, but there are going to be, for every one of those who make the optimal, there will be 5 or 10 who tank your lineups. So,
Right.
But what I'm seeing here is, try to get your two studs. Don't completely punt with any position, but you can kind of still get your access to your studs if you build a balanced lineup. And as far as ownership goes, the past few years here, there's been a golfer who kind of emerges at about 35% ownership, which is a little less than we sometimes see. But from there, it's kind of bumps down to like 25%, and then it's really flat. So I talk about ownership a lot and not trying to chase the chalk. But I think the big takeaway is that you're not going to get significant leverage. There might be one golfer who really emerges. It could be DJ, it could be Rory. We'll kind of talk about that. But that's kind of what we're looking at for this no cut event, which, like you said, it requires a bit of a different approach from your typical event.
And I think that seeing the different roster constructions beneath, outside of the two studs, kind of shows us that the main takeaway is you want two studs who have a very legitimate chance to push for a win, which is why betting odds can be good to tell you, kind of give you a signal of who is expected to contend. If you look at this year's field, there are 10 golfers who have odds at 22-1 or shorter. I find that actionable. You kind of want to live within that top 10 as far as trying to find your two studs there. And we'll talk plenty about that throughout the podcast as well. But first, we are officially 2 months away from golf's first major, and FanDuel is rewarding fans who make the cut in the tournaments by giving them a chance to compete for their share of $15,000. Just finish in the top 50% of users in the weekly streak-eligible contest, and your make the cut streak continues. Best of all, you don't need to worry about missing a week. Your streak always stays alive until you fail to finish in the top 50%. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's take a look back here at past events at the Club de Chapultepec, starting off with Dustin Johnson last year. Kind of ran away with things, made a stinker of a day out of it. Also a winner here in 2017. So DJ, the key here, we're going to talk about him and Rory together. So you talk about DJ, and then we'll rank those two guys at the end.
Yeah, so Dustin Johnson has just been the guy here. This is our fourth year. He's won 2 of the events. The only other winner was Phil Mickelson, who's not in the field. So that means that Dustin Johnson's the only defending champ in the field here. And last year, you mentioned he ran away with it. He beat Rory by 5 strokes, and he beat everybody else by 10 strokes. He is recovering from some off-season surgery. He's played 3 straight weeks. Was second at the Saudi International, 32nd at Pebble Beach, 10th at the Genesis. He's a really good POA putter historically. He's righted his approach issues. Kind of struggled with that in the swing season, but things are looking up in February. He's really looking like a great option for this week's no-cut event. We can lump him in with Rory at the top of the FanDuel pool. So I want to hear your thoughts on DJ and Rory here.
Yeah, DJ, I was worried about initially before the Saudi International because of the knee injury, but he's very much alleviated concerns of that. And the 32nd at Pebble Beach, that was mostly just because he was terrible on Sunday. He was awesome the first 3 rounds there. So I view him better than 32nd there. The problem is I would rank Rory higher because Rory, he hasn't finished outside the top 5 since September. And I think that with Rory, I just want to keep on using him until it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, I'll go back to him for a bounce back. So basically, I'm just going to keep on using Rory McIlroy indefinitely. His stats are superb. He has plus history here. As mentioned, he was second behind DJ last year. He was 7th in 2017. So I like both of these guys, and I'm going to be okay having both in the same lineup, even though it is very costly. But I think if I had to pick one, I'd rank Rory over DJ. What about you?
Yeah, I'd put Rory over him, which is scary just because we know that Dustin Johnson can dominate. As we saw it last year. Really wasn't even close. Rory was the only one who kept it close. But Rory's just been so good for so long that I don't know how you don't, frankly, rank him higher. And it's not like Rory has no event form here.
Right.
He's second last year, seventh in 2017. So yeah, DJ got the wins, but Rory can definitely figure this course out. I prefer his current form. I prefer the stats profile. It's really, I mean, you can't go wrong really with either one, but I would put Rory a bit higher.
Do you view these two as being a tier above the rest? You don't need to mention specifics, but do you view these two as being in a tier of their own?
For FanDuel purposes, yes.
Okay.
But I would be fine putting Jon Rahm. I know you said you don't need specifics, but at $11,800, he's $200 cheaper than DJ, $400 cheaper than Rory. I think that Rahm is going to wind up being one of those kind of leverage plays away because everyone's going to want to play Rory. Everyone's going to want to play Dustin Johnson. So I think that Rahm is going to be really interesting this week.
Yeah, I agree that Rahm is interesting. And Justin Thomas, coming off missed cut, he's now actually missed 2 of his past 3, but one of those was funky wind related.
Yeah.
He was third in between there. So I still have interest in Justin Thomas too. But I do think that if I'm putting these in tiers, Rory and DJ for me are kind of by themselves, followed by Rahm and JT together. But I understand the argument for putting Rahm up there too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really drawn to Rahm as an outright win bet just because he offers way better value to me than Rory or DJ. But I think that's in the back of my mind. And I like we already talked about, we want our studs to have legitimate win upside. Jon Rahm has that. He's that good right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something we do need to factor in for sure. Let's move down to the lower tiers, and not lower, but more the mid-range, and talk about Sergio Garcia, because we don't talk about Sergio very often on this podcast, but he's been plugging away recently. He's been making some cuts, which is better than what he was doing over the summer, and he's been getting decent finishes. And he has a plus history here at Chapultepec. Garcia has been to this event all 3 years that this course has hosted it, and he has 3 top 12 finishes. He was 12th in 2017. He was 7th and 6th the following 2 years. And he did well tee to green all 3 years. He gained at least 4.8 strokes tee to green in all those events. So did putt well, but it was not the reason he finished well. He's come, he's been doing really well. The solid finishes for Garcia have come internationally. So we haven't seen a ton of data on him as far as validating whether his surge is legit recently, but the finishes have been there at least. So, Brandon, what do you think about Sergio Garcia at $10,300?
Did you mean to say his surge, or
no? I did not actually. I like it though.
You should have took credit for it. I was trying to set you up for it, but
I should have. Alas.
Yeah, I mean, Garcia, like you said, he's really someone who hasn't been on the top of our minds because he's been playing on the European tour lately, but his numbers kind of worldwide are still good to start the 2020 season. His approach numbers are there. His off the tee plays there. The around the green play is above average when you adjust for field strength, according to Data Golf. Struggles with the putter. That's always something that we can kind of see. His POA splits historically, nothing to get overly excited about. But for the price of $10,300, he's going to be someone who is worth considering if you're building lineups with 1 to 2 studs. Someone in this price range historically it shows up in the optimal because in this type of field, some of these golfers are just a bit underpriced. I'm not necessarily saying that Garcia is underpriced. I do prefer some other golfers in this range, but I really don't have any issues with Garcia based on the course history and the recent form as well.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too. I don't have any issues. And I could see myself in this range at times because there are some like we don't want to punt, but there are some cheaper golfers who are around $8,000 who I think are viable. And when you use someone like that, you can get back up to this range. So I might be here. I do like a decent number of guys in this tier. We got Patrick Reed, I think, is actually interesting at 10-1. Gary Woodland at 10-1 as well. Mark Leishman is 10,000. they are all in consideration for me. I'd put Sergio in that range. I don't think he'd be at the top of that range for me. Specifically, Reed, I think, is interesting. But I would say he's in consideration, which is a lot more than I would have said about Garcia like over the summer, because he really was not anyone I was willing to consider that. But now he is.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want. I'm sure I'm going to talk about him later on, but Louis Oosthuizen, $10,400 is another golfer worth considering. So get your one or two studs. I would try to prioritize at least one golfer in this range, and then round out your lineup from there. But like you said, we do have some golfers around 8,000, so I think that's going to be the way that I probably go more often than not with my lineup construction.
I think I could see myself going there too. There are guys in the high 9,000s I like more, but if it gets me access to guys like Reed, like Garcia, like Woodland, etc., I'm willing to do it for sure. Let's move down to the lower salary tier and talk about Tyrrell Hatton. And Brandon, Hatton hasn't played in a while. He won an event towards the end of the fall, hasn't played since January 1st, though. And that's a pretty long layoff for a golfer. However, Hatton has done really well at Chapultepec in the past. So what do you see with him when trying to balance those two conflicting sentiments around him?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be risk here, but you kind of have to take a little bit of risk, even though it's a no-cut event. You want someone who has some high-end upside, and Hatton fits that bill. He's one of 18 golfers by my count in the field to have played here all 3 years. He has good finishes in them. That's obviously why we're talking about him. Started with a 10th and a 3rd. 19th a year ago. He's gained strokes tee to green at Chapultepec in 10 of 12 rounds, tied for the best mark among those 18 golfers. So it's not just the putter. We kind of learned of Hatton being a good putter, but he's got a really well-rounded game at this point in his career. He's got good recent form. It's just not that recent. Last played in Dubai, undergone wrist surgery since then. Prior to that event, when he was 46th, he had a win and 4 more top 20s. So the only real concern is the layoff and coming back from wrist injury. But Hatton's someone who's dealt with a lot of wrist injuries in the past. I'm not saying that we can be dismissive of it, but at $9,100 with this course form, a course that does kind of require some course knowledge, I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
My question is, my internal question is like, can I trust him in a cash game? Because the price is so good,
right?
But what are your thoughts on Hatton?
I think he's a really good tournament play because we talk about making the assumption game, and like we want to make realistic assumptions. I think it is a realistic assumption you could make that Tyrrell Hatton is healthy, and if you make that assumption, he would be very much underpriced at $9,100. So kind of in your mind, figure out the odds that he is fully healthy. I know that's not a very easy thing to do without any information, but like I think that's the way you play it there. For cash games, I do not like to play the assumption game, and I think that makes it a little bit tougher for me to go with Hatton. He's in an okay tier. There are guys around him who I think are very viable and very interesting. So for cash games, I am wary of him, and I have alternatives to go to. So I don't think he'll make the cut for me in cash games. But I agree with you where the tournament appeal is really good. And like after he won, he said that that wrist had been bothering him ever since like the 2017, I think it was the Masters. Yeah. It had been bothering him for a while. He said he was feeling better. So like that to me is encouraging despite the, operation. So I am intrigued by Hatton for sure. And I'm willing to go there in tournaments, just not cash games.
Yeah, I think he'll be a super volatile play for a lot of reasons, and he could be one of the cheap golfers who does carry significant ownership. Maybe people aren't fully cognizant of the injury, so he's gonna be someone who I have to track the ownership of. If he gets up to, again, there's usually a golfer in like the mid 30s in ownership to lead the pack, and then it bumps down to like 25%. If he's like 25% owned because he's so cheap, I might just avoid him and kind of play the angle that he struggles, but it's going to be a wait and see depending on the sentiment for him.
Yeah, I think that I'm way more willing to fade the chalk when there is a legit reason to be concerned. With Hatton, there is. So I would also be keeping an eye on that for sure, because if he projects to be popular that's a time where you probably want to hit the eject button. And again, it's not a bad tier. There are other guys I like there too.
And one quick thing, he did put on his website this schedule that he planned on playing. He planned on kind of returning sooner than this, so that could be lingering. And I mean, there's no cut, but there is withdrawal concern.
Yep. So keep that in mind for sure with Hatton, because there is definitely risk there, but the upside is there enough to justify checking him out for tournaments. Let's talk now about Francesco Molinari. He looks pretty broken right now, Brandon. It has not been good. He has missed 3 straight cuts. He has not gotten a top 20 finish since September. That's bad. However, he is $7,900, and this is a course where he was pretty good previously because Molinari has been here all 3 times. He had a top 25 finish in each. That includes a 17th in last year's event. That's good. The problem is that this happened before his game really tanked. So there are reasons that Francesco Molinari is an extreme value play at $7,900. He is not underpriced. That is not the word I would use for Francesco Molinari. Have you seen anything that allows you to buy in, or are we staying away from Molinari until we see something more here?
So, I mean, the risk of waiting to see something is you can miss out on a big week, especially at a low price. And he may be underpriced, but he's definitely not mispriced. This isn't like a mistake or anything like that. Right. But if you look at his numbers, he is over 5 events in 2020. He has been negative in every strokes gained category when you adjust for the field according to Data Golf. So, I mean, he's losing almost, 0.8 strokes tee to green per round. You can't do much with that. He's just not the same golfer. And, sure, he's done well enough here, but, you kind of have to score birdies to be a good FanDuel play. And it's just not what Molinari does. He's going to be best when the winner is like 4 under. And he's just.
I think that's less of a concern when he's $7,900 than when he was like 10-6.
I still, pars don't pay the bills necessarily. Yeah. Like it's one thing to finish well, but it's just not necessarily. We need the birdies. We need the scoring bonus.
Right. So I think that with Molinari, you were talking about how it's bad to wait because you will. Once you buy in, everyone else will buy in too. I am actually okay with it because you can see signals of a turnaround before he pops enough to get attention, which is why with Molinari, I am okay holding off and waiting to see that. Like, if we start to see the approach numbers turn around without necessarily leading good finishes, like if he has good approach numbers but a bad putting week, then that's when I'll start to buy with Molinari. But as you mentioned, we have not seen that turnaround yet. So I'm going to hold off personally. But like, if you want to try to be ahead of something, you could potentially go here. I just don't think there's been enough to justify it yet. The good thing is he can't miss a cut when there is no cut. So, hey, it's going to get better than it was.
Is it?
Maybe.
We'll see. I'm not going to use them. So
I'm not either. But I think that the way that I play it is wait until that strokes gain data, the approach data starts to get better. If you see a sort of uptick, buy in then. We have not seen that yet. Hold off for now. Let's look at some golfers who, unlike Molinari, have been golfing pretty well recently. One of them is Tommy Fleetwood. Now, Tommy Fleetwood, kind of a similar discussion to Tyrrell Hatton. No surgery, thankfully, but we haven't seen him in a while. So how do you balance that with Fleetwood, who was really, really good back over the summer?
Yes, he's $11,000. He does qualify as a stud. He's got some win equity to his name. So he's someone who I would consider as like my second stud. I don't think that I can really play Fleetwood into other golfers who are more expensive than him. Maybe I can, but I haven't really toyed with it, and I don't think I'd like it for this format. But, I mean, he's kind of quietly played this event 3 straight years, was a runner-up in 2017, followed it up with a 14th and 19th the past 2 years. So he definitely has the ability to contend at this course. He's had a 3-week layoff, but was 11th over in Dubai before a second in Abu Dhabi the week prior. And if you dig back farther than that, his most recent starts are another second and first on the European Tour. Given the layoff, there is some concern, but he was off almost 2 months before those two good finishes that are a bit more recent, and that inspires confidence for me. We know that Fleetwood is a really good ball striker. We've seen him perform at this course. He is a bit of a discount from some of the bigger names, understandably so. But how does someone like Tommy Fleetwood at $11,000 in this field fit your eye?
Well, he fits the cutoff for being that second stud because you mentioned that there's win equity to his name. That's what I want. I don't care. Like the difference between a guy who is 16 to 1 and a guy who's 22 to 1 doesn't really matter that much to me, honestly. So I think Fleetwood fits what I want, and he gets you the good ball striking without sacrificing short game because he ranks 8th around the green the past 50 rounds. He's a plus POA putter. So I'm getting the ball striking. I'm getting win equity. I'm not sacrificing short game. I think that's really good. He is $100 less than Xander Schauffele. I like Xander more, and I am going to prefer Xander within this tier. But I think that I will have a roster construction that goes, Rory plus someone around here often enough to still get to Tommy Fleetwood. And I think that Fleetwood would be second for me in this tier behind only Xander. So I'm going to use Tommy Fleetwood. He's not my favorite here, but I'm going to use him. What about you?
Yeah, he was like a coin flip for me between he and Xander. I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I love Xander, but they're kind of similar overall. But Schauffele specifically he definitely has that win equity. Yeah. He's got that upside in these no-cut events. That's what he does best. He also has some of his worst performances kind of in these events, so keep that in mind. But if you're going all or nothing, which I think is a fine approach for this no-cut event, I do have Schauffele above Fleetwood, but I do like both. And Rory plus both leaves you with 85-67 for three golfers. So
could be worse.
It could be a lot worse. I like that.
Okay. I am intrigued by that for sure because that gets you three studs, three guys with win equity. And basically what you're getting is three swipes that identify the winner instead of two. And I find that to be valuable. Risky for sure, but there is value in that as well. Let's move down to the value range and talk about Victor Perez. And he got some attention over the fall. He finished fourth at the WGC HSBC Champions, and now he's $9,300. He's 80 to 1 to win, and pretty interesting guy. He's been good outside of that event too. He was runner-up at both the Abu Dhabi HSBC Championship and at the Turkish Airlines Open. He also won the Alfred Dunhill's Links Championship, and that is a good event from a field strength perspective. Perez is 19th in approach in a small sample this year on the Euro Tour. He was 11th last year in that stat, so approach numbers are good. He's okay from a distance perspective. I'm willing to give him a look at $9,300. What about you?
So I don't know a lot about Perez, not going to lie. I don't. He hasn't been necessarily on my radar. He doesn't have the PGA Tour data. The first place to look then is the European Tour stats. And if he's checking the boxes there, I'm fine with it at $9,300 because I'm probably not going to build every lineup trying to get three studs. So basically three golfers at $11,000 or above. So more likely I'm going to be in this low $9,000 range. And I do like plenty of golfers, but Perez, someone with good current form, good approach numbers, good ball striking, that's kind of all you can ask for at $9,300. So I'm willing to take a chance, but I'm just being honest. Don't know much else about him.
I mentioned that I do like this range. I think that there are golfers I am very willing to use down here. But with that said, everyone down here has a hole in their game. So there is going to be risk with all of them. And there is risk with Perez too. But I think that means that he is viable. So I'm very okay going here. And he's someone I'm definitely going to use at $9,300. Let's move down to someone else, Brandon, whose name I can't pronounce. I'm going to let you handle this one. I am trying to Google it right now, but my Google is not being accommodating. So talk me through your second current form golfer. and let's figure this one out together.
It's Christian Bezuidenhout. Bezuidenhout definitely qualifies as someone with good current form. Second in Dubai, 21st at the Saudi International. Won the Dimension Data Pro-Am, which is a co-sanctioned event between the African Sunshine Tour and the European Tour's Challenge Tour, which is basically their Corn Ferry Tour, more or less. He did win it by 1 stroke and was 10 strokes better than all but 4 golfers, and the field was 180 golfers. So I know that you have to adjust for the field strength there, but really overperformed relative to a lot of golfers. So I like that. He is up to 48th in the world golf rankings, according to Data Golf's rankings, which I frankly just like more because they're based in better metrics. He's 54th in the world. I like that. The course form, or the form is there. No course form, however. But I know you probably don't have a whole lot of input on Bezuidenhout, but does he do anything for you based on just having really, really good form coming into a field where you don't want to punt on too many unknowns, but what are you doing with someone like Bezuidenhout?
Well, I think that the Data Golf ranking numbers that you mentioned are kind of the key for me because, like you said, they do a good job of adjusting for field strength and all that stuff. So seeing him 54th there, I think is intriguing because getting the 54th ranked golfer in this field at a salary of $8,500 is pretty good. So I think that's enough to get me interested. Again, there are guys in this range who I like. So it's not like we're totally devoid of options, but I would consider him. How are you viewing him right now?
So I think this week what I'm going to settle in on, and it's scary, but I'm going to limit my studs in the sense of...
Agreed.
I want to focus in on, let's say, 5 or 6, rotate them in, try to get as many lineups with 3 of them as I can, but kind of lock in my studs and rotate in the values, try to hit on the right values. Typically, or not typically, but sometimes it's actually the other way where there's not a lot of value and there are a few who stand out. So I just plug them in and then kind of rotate in the studs, hope I hit the winner. I think I'm going to go the other way this week because there is a lot of unknown. There's going to be unknown in the sense of just variance of going down to Mexico, dealing with, we've seen golfers get just sick from the water and we don't know what to expect necessarily. The elevation change is very strange it's going to be strange for a lot of these first timers. So I'm probably going to lock into 4, 5, 6 studs and rotate in these values. So he's going to be on the list for me.
I think that's what I'm going to do as well, where I kind of commit to quote unquote my guys in the top range, which is why it was important with the Xander and Fleetwood discussion to figure out where I rank them in that tier, because I do want to kind of commit, and I don't want to be having all 6 guys from that second tier. I want to kind of commit and then rotate through because it's not just that we don't know guys like Victor Perez and all these guys, but we don't have a lot of as good of data on them. And I think that's the biggest thing for me.
It's the data. Yeah. And look, some guys are just fueled by short game and putter, and that matters this week, but I don't necessarily know how some of these golfers are just going to adjust to this new field, to this tough field. So the one thing that I always try not to do is think I know more than I do.
Right.
So I'm going to adjust for that, focus in on my studs, and then rotate in the values this week.
And I will be doing the exact same. Let's finish up the current form discussion with another guy who's played a lot on the Euro Tour. That's Kurt Kitayama. And his stats on the Euro Tour last year were not very good. But he started to pick things up towards the end of the year. And I think he's kind of interesting at $8,800. Kitayama's run started at the Italian Open. He finished 3rd there. Followed that up with a 4th at the Amundi Open de France. Kitayama has been to 9 events from the Italian Open on, so including that one. In that time, he has 3 top 5s, he has 4 top 10s, made the cut in all 8 events. His worst finish is 48th, so really good finishes recently. The problem is that unlike with Victor Perez, we don't have really good Euro Tour numbers and stats to turn to here to justify those finishes. So Kitayama's a value at $8,800. The data on him less fruitful than Perez. So are you willing to roll the dice on Kurt Kitayama at $8,800?
Yeah, I actually kind of pinpointed him in my primer on Number Fire. I do have some data from Data Golf again. So it's just a great resource. I use it frequently, but
And it's free.
yeah. Most of it's free, but they have a thing called Performance Table. It kind of looks at expected wins based on their performance, but it also kind of lists out their strokes gain data and adjusts for field for them. So it's a very, very good tool. Over five events in 2020, he's positive. And all three tee to green stats. He has not been a good putter necessarily, but he's still young. He's like 27. So I can kind of buy into some smaller samples with him. But again, he's going to be one of these values who I just rotate in because some of these values are going to hit. It's a small field. So it's just by very nature of how this is going to work. Some of these golfers are going to hit. So I want to lock into my studs. I might miss out on the winner at the top, but that's a risk I'm willing to take because I would rather have. I don't want to confine myself to a lot of ownership on these more volatile plays.
And you don't want to rotate through everything because
you can't play everyone.
The odds that you get the right combo then are small. Yeah. So you want to either commit to studs or commit to value plays. Here, I think we're both on the same page where we feel safer about the studs. We know more about them, know more about their data. So it makes more sense to commit to them, filter through the value plays. If you had to pick a favorite of the guys we just discussed, where would you lean there?
Of Perez, Bezadenhout, and Kitayama?
Yes.
I'm going to go with Kurt.
Okay, Kurt Kitayama. New heat check favorite. Let's go. If he doesn't do well, he'll fit right in. Yeah. Let's look at what bookmakers are saying about this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Rory, McIlroy, and Dustin Johnson alone at the top. McIlroy 5-1. DJ is 6-1. Then John Rahm and Justin Thomas are up next. They are both 10-1. Adam Scott, fresh off that win, making Brandon some buckos last week. And Webb Simpson, they're both 16-1. Xander Schauffele is 18-1. We got Hideki Matsuyama and Tommy Fleetwood at 20-1, with Bryson DeChambeau at 22-1. He is the last guy before there is a drop-off to Colin Morikawa and Paul Casey. They are 33 and 34 respectively. Nobody else is shorter than 41-1. Brandon, we talked about Rory and DJ already, so that group is settled. If you decide to go Rory or DJ and then drop down for your second person and don't jam in both Rory and DJ, who from that second group stands out most to you as being able to push for a win here?
If I can cheat, I'm going to go with John Rahm because
Yep.
It's going to be Rahm. I don't know I don't have a good feel for the ownership yet. I'll have to check fan share, but I might avoid Dustin Johnson or try to be in line with the public on Dustin Johnson because I think Rahm just rates out kind of better from a win equity standpoint in my simulations than DJ. So if I can get any ownership leverage on Rahm over DJ, I like that. But if I'm going to go a little bit cheaper to help out anyone who's building lineups who doesn't quite want to punt with any of their golfers, it's probably going to be Xander or Fleetwood. They really stand out to me, but this is a field where none of those guys you named are anybody that I would not want on my teams. That's correct. How good this field is.
I might put Webb there. I don't know if that's stupid.
But you don't want him?
Not really.
Nobody wants. Okay, nobody wants Webb. He's.
It's not that I don't want Webb. He is the easiest one to cross off when I'm trying to narrow down my list because of the distance.
Yeah,
and I do factor in distance.
Yeah. I mean, I understand it, but I just need to plant a flag and let everyone know that Webb is criminally underrated.
Okay, that's accurate when they're not at a distance course. That is what I'll say. I do want to mention that Adam Scott, it is point chasey to go after him. However, we were both on him last week. You bet him. I mentioned him during the podcast, someone that I liked. The data is very good for him. So while it feels point chasey to go at Adam Scott coming off a win, the data is still really freaking awesome on him. I would not write him off. If he were to be popular, I'd write him off very easily. But I am still interested in him for sure. I agree with your assessment that for the salary, Xander is very enticing because he gets you win equity without a super top heavy lineup. So if I had to pick just one who I like from a DFS perspective, it would be Xander. But I do think that, again, I want to mention Adam Scott is like still very much a viable option, is the way I'd phrase it.
Yeah, so Scott to start the week is 11th in fan share tags. So we're going to see a lot of flat ownership. You're not going to get, I mean, there might be one or two of these guys near the top who sneaks through at like single digit ownership just because, but Scott is not going to be over owned based on the early reports. Xander is tied for 8th along with Webb and Hideki. And then Tommy Fleetwood, we've kind of been, I mean, I feel like we're both a little close on Fleetwood and Xander, but Fleetwood's actually 2nd in tags right now. So I'll let ownership
Where is
dictate
Justin
that
Thomas out of curiosity?
He is 6th.
It's higher than I thought it would be. My thought process was he's coming off a missed cut. That may push people away. We have Rahm, Rory, and DJ. From a narrative perspective, if I were just predicting things based off of narrative, I would have expected Justin Thomas to be relatively underowned. That doesn't seem like it'll be the case, though, which is disappointing.
Well, relatively, he'll probably be 18-ish, I would say, something like that. Where it's but that's where a lot of these golfers are, just because of the way that this field is. DJ is out ahead, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the DJ versus Rahm leverage play does look like it's going to check out.
Okay, very cool. Whose odds have shifted since things opened yesterday at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Xander and Fleetwood, coincidentally. Xander was 20. He's now 18-1. Fleetwood was 22. He's now 20. Your boy Paul Casey, 41 up to 34-1.
He's only my boy Thursday through Saturday. Sundays, we need to talk, bud.
Yeah, I can see that.
Last 2 weeks have been gross. Just don't play Sundays anymore, Paul. Just let it ride.
Well, he's got to this week because it's a no cut.
Does he? Just withdraw. I don't care. Withdraw.
Tyrrell Hatton, unsurprisingly, a big move. He was 80-1. He is now 65-1. Both Brent Snedeker and Rafa Cabrera-Bello from 80 to 70. Kevin Kisner from 100 to 80. Charles Howell and Lee Westwood moved up from 120 to 100. And then two golfers' odds have fallen. That's Scotty Scheffler from 70 to 80 and Sung Gung from 80 to 100.
The Tyrrell Hatton one is interesting because I feel like he's a better betting option than a DFS play because you want volatility in betting. You still want volatility in DFS. It's just less attractive there. So Hatton moving from a betting perspective does not increase my safety feelings around him.
No.
It just means it validates him as being a good tournament play. Yeah. What about some lower salary guys with short odds? Who stands out there?
Yeah, there's not going to be a ton, but there are a few. Hatton specifically, 65-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. He's priced at $9,100 on FanDuel. Rafa Cabrera-Bello is 70-1 at $9,200. And then we have a list of golfers listed at 80-1 to win. That's Kevin Kisner, Victor Perez, Byung-Hoon Ahn, Billy Horschel, Corey Connors, and Brandon Grace. They're kind of in the low 8,000s or low 9,000s, but Grace is only $8,600. Connors is $89,000.
I found Grace interesting. He's missed back-to-back cuts, but his approach data, especially in the most recent one, wasn't bad. So Grace is at least on my list. He's not my player picks, but I would say he is interesting to me among that list. Perez, we've already mentioned. You're going to talk about Ahn in the player picks. So a couple of guys there are at least, I know, shocker, are at least interesting. Weather for this weekend, winds will start off pretty still on Thursday morning, and then they'll spike to around 10 miles per hour in the afternoon. And then on Friday, they'll be around 9 miles per hour for most of the day. So if you want a slight wind advantage, you could go at the golfers with the earlier tee times on Thursday. I don't think the wind gap is big enough to go out of your way to do that, but there is an angle there. Outside of that, things look solid across the board. There is no wind on Saturday or Sunday, no rain in the forecast, so should be good to go. Maybe a slight advantage to the early Thursday guys, but not enough where I really want to pounce on it. So let's dive into our player picks here for the WGC-Mexico. Brandon, when you're picking out your studs, who stands out to you there?
I'm going to go with John Rahm. I'm going to stick with it. I have a good feeling about him. I think that he kind of makes sense as an outright bet plus 1,000. But for FanDuel, the safety should be there. The scoring's there. He's got the distance. He's got pretty much everything to his game. Right in the thick of things in terms of the world's best right now. I thought he would go a little overlooked. Seems like he might based on the fan share tags because he's up there with tons of other stars with, either being Rory or DJ at Chapultepec. So he's got that going for him. Not the best for him at this course, but 3rd, 20th, and 45th. Again, it's a small field, so kind of keep that in mind with the 45th. But we've seen some high-end upside from him here. Elite ball striker, really good POA splits. The only slight blemish is the around the green play. He's 38th over the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National, but that is not enough for me to avoid John Rahm, especially if we're getting him at relatively low ownership relative to the other studs.
And I guess the course history doesn't worry me that much because A, he's kind of volatile, and B, he's been really, really good recently.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about the course for him too much. And I think that your angle of Rahm over DJ is getting more attractive the more I realize that DJ is going to be really popular given the course history.
Yeah. Like I said, the past 2 years, there's been someone at about 35%, and then everyone else is kind of like 25 and below. I would bet that DJ is that 35%er.
And if he's 35%, that means fewer people will use Rory McIlroy, who is my first high salary guy. And my edict with Rory for DFS is use him until it stops working. And again, once it stops working, you buy for the bounce back too. So we're just in on Rory. His last finish outside the top 5 came in September. He has not finished worse than 26th since he missed the cut at the Open. And the reason he missed the cut there was because he had a terrible Thursday, kind of rallied Friday. So he's been awesome. Rory is 2nd in distance in this field the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. He is 6th in approach. He is 6th around the green. He was also 2nd behind DJ here last year and 7th in 2017. So course knowledge, course form on his side. The POA numbers are not as good as DJ's. I think that's kind of, you mentioned the blemish for Rahm being around the green. The blemish for Rory is his POA splits, but I'm going to keep on using Rory. They were on POA last week. He was still awesome there. So buying into Rory McIlroy until you make me stop. Any final thoughts for you on Rory, Brandon?
No, I love him too. Love the top 3 guys, but it's going to be kind of a game theory week for us, or for me.
I think that's fair play. Who else do you have in the studs tier?
So I'm going to bump down because we talked about Fleetwood quite a bit already, and I'm going to go with someone who we didn't really talk about much, but that's Louis Oosthuizen at $10,400. This range could kind of go overlooked, but it's been pretty relevant for like the optimal construction the past 2 years. And he's a really balanced golfer, which is what I'm prioritizing most this week. He's 34th or better in all 4 strokes gain stats, decent splits on POA, nothing really to worry about from that department. And he has 12 rounds at Chapultepec, finished 48th, 30th, and 25th. But again, only 18 golfers have that many rounds at this course under their belts. He's been 6th, 20th, 2nd, 5th, and 23rd in his past 5 European starts. Fits the balanced build that I'm going for. And again, doesn't really have the glaring weaknesses. And that's what I'm mostly trying to avoid this week.
Yeah. I am not on Oosthuizen, mostly because I like the guys beneath him more, and I want to go with the super high-end guys more often, but I understand the appeal there for sure. And he would fit it. I just happen to like the guys cheaper than him a little bit more. And the guys are more expensive too, including Xander Schauffele, who is my second high-salary guy, because I think that when you're looking at this field, again, I want to stick to guys who have really good win odds, and Xander gets me that along with Tommy Fleetwood. Without sacrificing anything, they're both pretty well-rounded. Xander, 18th in distance, 16th in approach, 18th around the green the past 50 rounds, and he's also a really good POA putter. It's a smaller sample for him, but the small sample numbers are good. Xander's been here the past 2 years, so he is familiar with the course. He finished 18th and 14th, and we know that he can compete in the toughest fields because that's exactly what he does. He's not quite Brooks, like where we can only use him at like majors and big events, but we've seen him measure up well in those spots. So having no cut allows Xander to be aggressive. I like that. At 11-1, I like him a lot. Are you still going in with him over Fleetwood by a hair?
I would, if I have the choice. I like Fleetwood a lot. I like Xander a lot. I'm really digging the potentially Rom plus one of the or both of these guys, or Rory and both of those guys. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty intriguing lineup build. But Xander definitely someone to keep in mind at just 11,100 because we've seen him hoist the trophy at these types of events before.
And if I'm committing to studs, I could see myself having only Xander and Fleetwood from this tier, this like second tier. I need to concentrate ownership somewhere or exposure somewhere.
Right.
I could see myself zeroing in on pretty much exclusively those two. Let's slide down to the middle tier now and talk about a guy we alluded to before, but did not expand upon why we like him. I like him as well. So talk to me about Patrick Reed, Brandon.
Yeah, so we used to make the cutoff $10,000 and below for the mid price, but at 10,100, Patrick Reed's just
our podcast, our rules, man.
Yeah,
you don't have to apologize.
Yeah, well, my default my default response to everything is just to apologize.
I'm sorry.
So Reed is 10,100. I'm looking for golfers who do everything well. That is Patrick Reed. He is 21st or better in all 4 strokes gained categories. Played here all 3 years. He's finished 61st, 37th, and 14th over his past 5 events. Pretty volatile. Second cut, 6th cut, 51st. But there's high-end upside for Patrick Reed. And frankly, the pedigree is just better than the salary. And every time we get a field like this, there are just some golfers who come in cheaper than they should be just based on the nature of the field. That's Patrick Reed this week. So something like Rory, Xander, Reed is intriguing to me. That still kind of fits what's been most optimal here. So Patrick Reed going to be one of my most owned golfers at just 10,100.
Yeah, last year's optimal build was that effectively, and I find that very intriguing. And Reed would be the first guy I would turn to in this range because of the well-rounded nature that you mentioned. There are no holes in his game, and we've seen him do well against really tough fields. The reason I'm generally off Patrick Reed is he tends to be more expensive than I think he should be.
Right.
He is very much not that right now. So now that things have adjusted down, I'm going to be into Patrick Reed, and if I'm going with this build where and I do wind up committing to people, I could see myself having a decent amount of Patrick Reed because he will fit this build perfectly, and I'm very into that. My first mid-salary guy is Victor Perez, mainly just buying into the current form here, but there are other reasons to do so. And again, we've got a lot of good Euro Tour data on him. Outside of the approach numbers mentioned before, he finished last year ranked 9th in the Euro Tour in scoring average. He was right between Rafa Cabrera-Bello and Justin Rose. He was 6th in strokes gained off the tee. He was 11th in approach, and doesn't seem to be super long off the tee, but he was about 5.5 yards longer than the field average in the events he was in across all of last year. So he's not a negative with his distance. I think that's good. He was 4th at the WGC HSBC. That shows he can go low against good fields. So for $9,300, I'll bite here. And if you're going to go kind of top heavy, he fits well with that build. So $9,300, kind of the sweet spot from a salary perspective. And I see enough with him for me to feel pretty good. Probably potentially for a cash game as well. I don't know if you'd go there, but I would consider it.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't go there for a cash game, but that's just like a flaw in myself that I don't know enough about Victor Perez's game.
I mean, I don't either, but the stuff that I've found about his game is encouraging.
And there's really nothing to suggest that he's kind of inflated. So I have no issues with him. He's just going to be a little bit lower on my list.
So I mentioned before we want well-rounded golfers. Keep that in mind. However, who is your second mid-salary guy?
It's going to be Byung-Hun An. He's $9,200. And look, he's well-rounded. He's a very good tee to green. He's 22nd in strokes gained off the tee, 21st in approach, 2nd around the green. Over the past 50 rounds, according to FantasyNational.com.
Where is he elsewhere?
The putting is awful. It does not stack up. If he could putt decently, he would be so good, but he just does not. He's played here twice.
If he could putt decently, he'd be like Adam Scott.
Yeah.
Like, that's what he'd be. He'd be amazing.
Yeah. He's been 48th and 45th here in his 2 tries, which not great, but there's still familiarity with the course and the setup, and we're still getting a really, really good tee to green golfer for $9,200. So there could be fantasy scoring here, even if the finish isn't quite as high as we might want it to be.
I think the good thing with Ben On is like the risk that you have with him in a cut event is if he has his bad putting day on Friday, he can miss the cut. Here, if he has a bad putting day Friday, he can still make up for it a little bit on Saturday and Sunday. So yes, it means you're getting a larger sample of bad putting, but it means you're getting a larger sample of a good ball striker too. So he still will be someone I use down here, despite our emphasis on well-rounded golfers, just because I know he is capable of putting it together for 4 rounds. And everyone down here has a flaw. So I'm going to use him. That same line of thinking applies to Tyrrell Hatton. Everyone down here has a flaw. He's coming off surgery, hasn't played since September. So I will not go here in cash games. I am not going to use Hatton there. But for tournaments, there is a lot to like. Because again, he mentioned he finished 2019 on a high note with a win at the Turkish Airlines Open. He was 6th at the CJ Cup. He was 14th at the WGC HSBC. He's got a good balanced stats profile, despite largely playing only in really tough PGA Tour events. So I'm willing to buy into that at $9,100. Though again, not going there in cash games because of the health concerns that you mentioned. And I think that the website edition about him having hoped to come back earlier makes it a little bit more concerning, but I'll still go here for tournaments.
Yeah, I really think that avoiding him entirely is overthinking it a bit. But I don't feel comfortable enough just because there's too much of an unknown for cash games. But we know what the upside is in tournaments, and it's a really high-end finish here. So that's how we're treating him.
I agree. What do you see with the value plays here? Who stands out to you there?
I have Corey Connors, $8,900. He's going to make his debut here, which I don't like, but he's also coming off some not great form. He's 45th in cut over the past 5 weeks, and that's all he has. But still one of the better bets to make in this value range. I'm not saying to bet him outright, but I mean bet in terms of a high-end finish for him in DFS because the ball striking is good. He is both long and accurate off the tee enough to pick up strokes off the tee. The issue is the short game. It's just not quite there, but that's the risk you take by rostering too many golfers down in this range because not everybody is good enough to
good catch.
Beat up this course.
Yeah. I think the only thing that draws me away from Connors is if I'm going to go for someone of that archetype, I'd probably rather just go Scotty Scheffler, who is $100 more, also kind of struggles with the short game, but is a great ball striker. So I might go Scheffler over Connors, but I'm willing to use guys in that mold because they're this cheap. I want to look at Billy Horschel here. It's a salary-based play, which I'm not a huge fan of doing, but Horschel did bounce back with a big event at the Waste Management, which is good because he had struggled before that. Unfortunately, that event was largely fueled by gaining 5.1 strokes putting, but we know that Horschel is a good golfer, which makes me feel better about buying low on someone whose approach game has been off because when Billy Horschel's on, his approach is awesome. If he does get that approach back, he could wind up looking like a steal at this salary. So it is a bit of a leap of faith because the recent data is still bad, but at $9,000 in this field, I can live with some risk. So I'm going to take some stabs at Billy Horschel in tournaments. Will he fit your rotation, Brandon?
Yeah, he's underpriced relative to the long-term form. He's got the recent struggles, we know that, but this is just another reason why I want to fixate on my studs and just rotate in these guys because Billy Horschel could finish last or 10th, and we don't really have that volatility with the higher end golfers. So that's just the way I'm playing it. He's going to be in my rotation, but I don't necessarily think that he's a must play.
Yeah. Again, it's worth mentioning again that volatility has a negative connotation, but it's not always a bad thing. We want guys who are volatile and who are capable of hitting the high ends of the range of outcomes. I think that Horschel has a higher end range of outcomes than a lot of guys in this tier, and that's valuable to me.
Yep.
Let's move down to our second value plays. Someone that I almost wrote up for mine. That's Sebastian Munoz. What do you
Yeah.
see with him?
Yeah, I love these final two picks, so it's really going to tempt me into getting some extra studs. But Munoz, $7,900, really long win odds at plus 150 or 150 to 1. But he's top 33 or better in all four strokes gain stats over the past 50 rounds. So he's that balanced golfer that I'm looking for. I think he's a bit underpriced, which really helps this week. There's no course form, which is always going to be a concern for a course like this, but not many golfers in this price range have much course form to speak of. So if you're going to spend down because you want those extra studs, you're going to kind of deal with that. So, and if I'm risking it, I want better stats than other types of narratives or angles. And Munoz has that. He can kind of do everything for $7,900. I'm not saying he's a cash game play, but I'm really going to like what he opens up for me.
If you can get balanced, like a good, decently well-rounded golfer for $7,900, sweet. I'm into that for sure. My value play is Carlos Ortiz, and it may feel weird given that he was $8,400 last week in a weaker field. And it wasn't weak, weaker than this one. And now he's $8,800. That may feel strange, but he was underpriced last week. We were both on him for DFS. So seeing him get a price increase, I don't think is bad. Kind of like a correction to where he should be, because Ortiz ranks 6th in this field in distance. He is 23rd in approach. He is 15th around the green. He's also 3rd in POA putting across a non-100 round sample. It's not a full sample, although most guys don't have a 100 round sample on POA putting. So it's not a huge thing there. Ortiz has never played this event, so that's a bit scary. But the stats recently have been very good. Finishes have been good. I'll be in on him at $8,800. Other guys I think are worth mentioning are Scotty Scheffler at $9,000, Brandon Grace at $86,000. Lonto Griffin is $8,100. Not totally off of that. Eric Van Rooyen did not pay off for me last week. Missed the cut, but still kind of at least interested there as well at $8,200. Anyone else you want to mention, Brandon, as potential value plays, or any thoughts on Ortiz?
I love Ortiz. I would rather play Ortiz than Munoz, I think, but It's pretty close. I might play both. We'll see how that goes. But
they fit really well if you want to do the super. If you jam in like both Fleetwood and Xander, he fits in well with that.
Yeah, and I mean I've been preaching a balanced build. Sebastian Munoz at $7,900 is not like a punt. I think he's just too cheap. So that's probably where I'm going to go. Other options, I mean, Lonto Griffin, Jason Kokrak, Matt Wallace at $7,400 was 33rd here last year, but he's just kind of a full-on stab.
Yeah. So there are options down here, but I think that it really does lend itself to what we said before, where you zero in on the studs you like the most, and then don't just use one of each guy in the lower range, but have lower exposure levels to them. Concentrate your exposure on the upper end. Any final thoughts there before we do win picks?
No, I think I think we're both on the same page, and I think that's kind of just the right way to do it.
All right, you've won 15-ish straight bobble hats. So yuck. Which means you've gotten to pick first for the win picks, but somehow I've passed you there. I'm going to focus on that rather than the bobble hat results, because our head-to-heads have been depressing recently. But no cut event, so I'm expecting to pick first next week. I'll let you pick first this time. One golfer. Let's cross off Rory and DJ.
Okay.
And then anyone 50 to 1 or longer to win.
Just because I'm going to have some action on him, I'll go with Jon Rahm and forego any other. I'll go with Jon Rahm.
Okay, so that means I'm picking 50 to 1 or longer. I don't like anybody here. I am going to go with the volatility angle we discussed before, where volatility is good if you're looking for winners. Tyrrell Hatton has that, so I know the downside is big. This could hurt my finishing average in the win picks, but we're trying to pick winners. So I'll go Tyrrell Hatton for my long one, and then I'm going to go Xander Schauffele as my high-end guy.
I'm going to have to root against Xander.
No. You can root for me. You can always root for this.
Well, I'll go with Sungjae Im.
Okay. Oh, nice.
I like He and Answer as kind of mid-range FanDuel plays at $9,700 and $9,600 respectively. But I will not hate playing or getting Sung Jae at 50 to 1.
Yeah, I think that's very good. Abraham Answer $9,600. I would go Sung Jae over Answer, as you did, but I think both are viable there. But hey, they don't get to do the hat dance if they win. So Tyrrell Hatton, the winner of the WGC-Mexico. I have Xander and Hatton. You have Rom and Sung Jae. Your picks sound better, but hey, oh well. Who cares? Not I. I guarantee you that. That's all we have for today. It should be a pretty fun event. I'm looking forward to it, Brandon. This should be a good one.
Yeah, it should be. Gotta like WGC events. Maybe there. Well, I won't even talk about the other golf league that's getting floated around. But well, I mean, I think we'll learn a lot.
Yeah, should be fun. We will certainly have a lot of fun with that, and back with you next week as well to talk more golf. We have the XFL podcast coming up on Thursday. Again, if you want to watch YouTube, see Brandon and I in matching sweatshirts. I said it right that time. Sweatshirts. We'll wear the Number Fire hoodies on Thursday, just as a heads up, letting you know beforehand. XFL podcast Thursday at 10 a.m. on YouTube, also posted on the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. NASCAR podcast not on YouTube, but will be posted later this week as well. Make sure you are subscribed to the Number Fire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get those right as they are posted. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, if they want to taunt you after Xander wins and you didn't pick him, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
I think you have to bet Xander now, so you have the emotional hedge there.
I probably will.
I think that's smart. I am at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for keeping the video side of things here tight and nice today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your lineups for the WGC-Mexico, and we'll talk to you again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by Number Fire.